In a world where death is certain, these three men from the Bible defied fate. How did they escape death's grasp? Let's find the truth behind the three men in the Bible that never died. Our first remarkable figure is Enoch. So, who is Enoch? Enoch was a descendant of Adam, not through Cain or Abel, but through Adam and Eve's third son, Seth. He was Noah's great-grandfather. While people back then lived for centuries, Enoch's life was a unique 365 years. But what really makes Enoch special is his relationship with God. Unlike most of the people around him who fell into sin, Enoch walked faithfully with God. Genesis 5:22-24 tells us, Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, because God took him away. This simple yet profound statement shows that Enoch's bond with God was so strong that God took him straight to heaven, bypassing death entirely. And there's more. Hebrews 11:5-6 praises Enoch's faith, saying, "By faith Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found, because God had taken him away." His unwavering faith and prophecy, as mentioned in Jude 1:14-15, foretold the coming of the Lord with thousands of his holy ones. Enoch's life is a powerful example of living a life of faith and obedience. It was a world filled with moral decay, much like the time before the Great Flood. In this world, Enoch stood out. At 65, he became the father of Methuselah, the oldest man recorded in the Bible. But what's really significant is not Methuselah's age, but Enoch's life of deep faith. Enoch walked closely with God for 300 years. His relationship with God was so intimate that it transcended the earthly realm. The Bible tells us that Enoch's bond with God was so special that God simply took him away, sparing him from death. This wasn't just a metaphor. Hebrews 11:5-6 says, "By faith Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away." Next, let's dive into the story of Elijah, one of Israel's greatest prophets. Elijah lived during the reign of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, a time when idolatry and moral decay were rampant. Elijah, a Tishbite from Gilead, was known for his miraculous deeds and bold confrontations. One of Elijah's most famous moments was his showdown with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. In a dramatic event, Elijah called down fire from heaven to prove the power of the God of Israel, leaving no doubt about who the true God was. But Elijah's story becomes even more extraordinary as we near the end of his life. In 2 Kings 2:1-12, we learn that Elijah knew his time on earth was coming to an end. He set out on a journey with his loyal companion and successor, Elisha. They traveled from Gilgal to Bethel, then to Jericho, and finally to the Jordan River. Along the way, other prophets kept telling Elisha that the Lord was going to take Elijah away, but Elisha refused to leave Elijah's side. As they reached the Jordan River, Elijah struck the water with his cloak, and the water parted. They crossed on dry ground. Suddenly, a fiery chariot with horses appeared, and Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this amazing event and cried out, "My father! My father! The chariots and horsemen of Israel!" Elijah's dramatic ascent to heaven is one of the most vivid stories in the Bible, making him another man who never experienced death. Elijah's life was marked by miraculous events. He declared a drought that lasted 3.5 years, was fed by ravens, and even revived a widow's son. His showdown with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel is legendary. He challenged them to call on their God to send fire to consume their sacrifice. When Baal's prophets failed, Elijah called on the God of Israel. Fire came down from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench around the altar. Despite all his incredible acts, Elijah also had moments of despair. After his victory on Mount Carmel, he fled from Jezebel, who wanted to kill him. He traveled to Mount Horeb, where he encountered God, not in the powerful wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a gentle whisper. This moment reminded Elijah that God often works in quiet and subtle ways. Elijah's departure from this world was as dramatic as his life. Knowing his time was near, he set out on a final journey with his loyal disciple, Elisha. They traveled from Gilgal to Bethel, then to Jericho, and finally to the Jordan River. Along the way, Elijah kept urging Elisha to stay behind, but Elisha refused, showing his unwavering loyalty. When they reached the Jordan River, Elijah struck the water with his cloak, parting it so they could cross on dry ground. As they walked and talked, a fiery chariot with horses appeared and separated them. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel!" Elijah's mantle fell to the ground, and Elisha picked it up, signifying that he had inherited Elijah's prophetic spirit. Elijah's story shows us that God's power and presence go beyond our earthly limits. His courage, faith, and miraculous departure encourage us to stay strong in our own faith, no matter what challenges we face. Now, let's talk about the third and most mysterious figure, Melchizedek. Unlike Enoch and Elijah, Melchizedek's story is wrapped in mystery and intrigue. He suddenly appears in Genesis 14 during a time of war between ancient city-states. After Abraham rescues his nephew Lot, Melchizedek, described as the king of Salem and priest of the Most High God, greets him with bread and wine and blesses him. Melchizedek's name means King of Righteousness, and he is also called the King of Peace, since Salem means peace. His story is explored further in the book of Hebrews, which shows his unique priesthood. Hebrews 7:3 says, "Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever." Some believe Melchizedek was a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ, while others think he was a distinct figure who symbolized Christ. His lack of recorded birth and death and his eternal priesthood make him a figure of great mystery and speculation. The Bible doesn't give us all the answers, leaving Melchizedek as one of the greatest enigmas in biblical history. And if you're learning a lot from all of this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Melchizedek's encounter with Abraham is brief but very significant. After Abraham's victory over the kings who had captured his nephew Lot, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, appeared. He brought out bread and wine and blessed Abraham. This simple act of blessing and sharing a meal hints at the Last Supper and Christ's role as our eternal high priest. What makes Melchizedek's priesthood unique is that it came before the Levitical priesthood, which was established through Aaron. Hebrews 7:1-3 tells us that Melchizedek's priesthood is eternal, without beginning or end. This is different from the Levitical priesthood, which had a clear start and end for each priest. The mystery of Melchizedek grows deeper when we consider his lack of genealogy. In a culture where lineage was very important, Melchizedek stands out as a priest without recorded ancestry. Because of this, some people believe Melchizedek was a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, representing the eternal priesthood that Christ would later fulfill. Some people see Melchizedek as a symbolic figure, representing the timeless and universal nature of Christ's priesthood. They believe his story was meant to foreshadow the coming of Christ and show the continuity of God's plan for salvation. Even though there's a lot of mystery about who Melchizedek really was, his story teaches us about the eternal nature of God's priesthood and the important role of Jesus as our high priest. Whether Melchizedek was a real person or a symbolic figure, His story points us to the ultimate priesthood of Christ, who mediates for us and brings us closer to God. And there you have it, the incredible stories of the 3 men in the Bible who never died. Enoch, who walked so closely with God that he was taken up without experiencing death. Elijah, the brave prophet, who ascended to heaven in a whirlwind. And Melchizedek, the mysterious priest king who continues to fascinate and intrigue us. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next one to learn more about amazing stories from the Bible.